All right, hello and welcome to this training. As you can see from the title, what we're going to be covering today is how your authentic self is a scam. And as you can see from the overview, what we're going to be talking about more specifically is first the overview itself, the authenticity trap, the programmed self, the constructed self, the review, and then your action items for the day or the next few days. Now, before we get started, if you want to work with me one-on-one, make sure to book a call from the link in the description. We help entrepreneurs, professionals, creators, and high performers across all sorts of fields to basically help them improve every aspect of their life, meaning health, wealth, love, and self. If you want this training along with its respective document that you see on the screen, make sure to join the free community from the link in the description. And if you want weekly newsletters on how to improve every aspect of your life, meaning health, wealth, love, and self, then make sure to join the free newsletter from the link in the description. With that said, let's get started and talk about the authenticity trap. So in 2003, two behavioral economists, Eric Johnson and Daniel Goldstein, published a study that quietly changed how we understand human decision-making. They looked at organ donation rates across Europe, and they basically found something strange. Countries like Germany and Austria are culturally almost identical. Same region, similar values, similar education levels, and yet Germany's organ donation rate sat at around 12%, while Austria's was over 99%. The difference had nothing to do with generosity or morality or awareness. It came from one thing. In Germany, the form required you to opt in. In Austria, the form required you to opt out. Almost nobody in either country actually made a choice. They just kept whatever was already selected for them. Now, the researchers called this the default effect, and it shows up everywhere. Retirement plans, insurance policies, software settings, privacy agreements. When something is pre-selected, people overwhelmingly just stick with it. Even when a better option is available, even when the stakes are enormous. The default always feels like the natural choice. It feels like what you would have picked anyway, and that feeling is almost always wrong. Now, this training is about one specific default that almost nobody thinks to question. The one that is running your identity. The collection of beliefs and emotional patterns and self-concepts that were installed in you before you had any say in the matter. Most people call that collection their authentic self. They protect it, they honor it, they build their entire lives around it, and they never once ask whether it was actually chosen or just pre-selected. There's this thing in the self-development world right now that honestly nobody's questioning, and it's the idea that you should just be yourself and be authentic and find your true self and lean all the way into it. And the whole culture has basically turned authenticity into something sacred, something you don't touch, something that you protect at all costs. And look, on the surface, maybe it sounds right, but what if the version of you that feels so real was actually assembled from pieces that were never yours to begin with? What if your authentic self is just the default setting on a form you never realized you could change? And what happens in practice is that people take this advice and they turn it into a reason to stay exactly where they are, the authenticity one, defending every pattern they have as just who I am. And they treat their anxiety or their avoidance or their stuckness as some kind of fixed trait that can't be questioned. The problem with that is growth literally requires you to become someone different, to become someone unfamiliar, someone you don't fully recognize yet. And this whole authenticity thing makes the unfamiliarity feel like you're betraying yourself. So what ends up happening is people use the word authentic as protection against anything that feels uncomfortable, and they walk away from it genuinely convinced they're making the wise call. And the self-help space keeps feeding this, right? Honestly. Every other post is about honoring your truth and trusting your inner voice and returning to yourself. And the assumption running underneath all of it is that somewhere deep down, there's like this pure, untouched, original version of you just waiting to be uncovered. Now, that version doesn't actually exist though, right? What most people call their authentic self is really just the loudest collection of habits and beliefs and emotional reactions they've picked up and repeated over the years. And they've run those same patterns so many times that the pattern started to feel like truth, like something solid and permanent, which is exactly where the trap closes. Now, the real damage here is the kind you can't really see easily. You just keep living the same year again and again, and you call it stability. You keep running into the same ceiling and calling it your limit. You keep pulling in the same results and calling it just how things are. And the whole time, you're actually guarding a version of yourself that was put together by accident most of the times. Nobody tells you this is happening. You could spend 10 years being authentic, quote unquote, and never once realize that you were really just being loyal to programming that somebody else installed. And that's years, real years of potential poured into maintaining a story that was handed to you before you could even evaluate it. Now, if you actually trace back the beliefs and preferences and emotional patterns you identify with, you'll most likely find that almost none of them were actually chosen. Your parents, your peers, people you love, etc., gave you some kind of a worldview before you could even talk. School gave you a template for what success is supposed to look like according to them. Your earliest social experiences wired you to chase approval or dodge rejection in very specific ways. And then culture and media and religion and your friend group just layered more on top of all of that. And none of it was really optional. You didn't get to review any of those beliefs before they went in. Nobody pulled you aside at 5 years old and asked what kind of operating system you wanted to run, essentially. It just happened. And that thing, the thing that makes it so powerful, is that all of it landed before your conscious mind was even online. And this is exactly why it feels so real. You genuinely can't remember a time before these beliefs existed, so they don't feel like programs. They don't feel like embedded things from others. They feel like facts. And from that point on, you just spend the rest of your life assuming those defaults are who you actually are and never once stopped to ask whether any of it was really deliberate. Once you identify with a belief, once you actually see it as part of you, you'll defend it with everything you've got. It's the consistency bias. You need to be consistent with your beliefs, right? And so you'll defend them. You can tell someone their fear around money is a learned pattern and watch how fast they push back. You can point out that someone's shyness is installed software and they'll take it as a personal attack. That's how deep the programming goes. It's in the body, the nervous system, the reflexes. You physically wired yourself around those patterns over years and years of repetition. And when you add the label authentic on top of all of that, it gives those patterns a kind of armor. Now they're not just habits anymore, right? They're your identity, they're you, they're part of you. And questioning them starts to feel like you're questioning yourself. So you end up protecting the very thing that's really keeping you in place, and you call it being honest with yourself. And that loop is almost impossible to recognize when you're actually inside of it. So the version of you that you've been honoring, like we've been saying, has a built-in ceiling, right? Every belief carries a boundary with it, a restriction, a constraint. Every identity can only hold a certain range of outcomes. And if your identity was assembled from limitation and fear and stories you inherited from other people, then the ceiling on your life is lower than you think it is. And it's a lot of the times someone else's ceiling because you've inherited those beliefs. So think of your self-concept again as a thermostat. It's constantly regulating your life to match an internal setting. You start making too much money and something in you pulls it back down to the familiar range. You start getting too much attention and you shrink yourself to match the version that feels safe. And that reset is what people experience when they say things like, every time I get ahead, something pulls me back. Nothing external is pulling them back, right? The internal setting is doing exactly what it was designed to do. And that pattern will keep repeating for as long as the identity stays the same. New strategies, new goals, new habits, new techniques, new tactics, all of it eventually bends to fit the shape of whoever you believe you are underneath. And every time you tell yourself you're just being realistic about your limits, what you're actually doing is locking that ceiling right where it is. You're treating a line you drew yourself as if it were a wall that somebody else built. And that ceiling only stands because you gave it permission to stand. You agreed with a belief that was handed to you probably decades ago, and now that agreement runs your entire life. Which means the ceiling can move. The moment you stop treating your current identity as something sacred and fixed, and start treating it as something editable and constructed, the whole thing opens up. So let's talk about the program self. So what makes this all so hard to see is that your life right now is a perfect readout of your internal program. Every result you're getting, every relationship dynamic you keep falling into, every frustration that keeps showing up on repeat, all of it is the outer expression of whatever's running on the inside. And the code has been running for so long at this point that the readout just looks like objective reality to you. Your bank account is feedback. Your energy levels are feedback. The kind of people you keep attracting is feedback. your friends, your friend group is feedback. All of it points back to one place, which is the set of beliefs you accepted as true somewhere along the way. Most of them before you were old enough to evaluate any of it. And most people just look at the readout and try to change the numbers directly. They go after more money, more fitness, more connection. They treat the symptoms. The readout doesn't actually change until the source changes, though. You can push results around all day long, and the moment you stop forcing, everything snaps right back to where it was. And the reason you can't see this clearly, the real reason, is that the programming controls your perception itself. It tells your brain what to notice and what to skip over. So the very tool you need to diagnose what's going on is already compromised by the thing you're trying to diagnose. Your brain is filtering millions of data points down to a handful every single moment. And the shape of that filter is determined by your beliefs. So you literally cannot perceive opportunities or connections or possibilities that fall outside whatever your current self-concept allows. And like we said with the thermostat, that creates a self-reinforcing loop. You believe something, your brain filters for evidence that confirms it, you see that evidence, and the belief gets stronger. Round and round it goes. And the entire time, it genuinely feels like you're just observing the world as it is. Which is exactly why people say things like, I've tried everything and nothing works for me. They haven't tried everything, right? It's impossible. They've tried everything that their current identity allows them to see. The approaches that would actually move the needle are invisible to them because those approaches live outside the filter. And the frustration builds from there, and it starts to feel like the whole system is rigged. And you've seen people and you've heard people say that. The system is rigged. Like other people have access to something they don't. Other people don't have anything special, right? They just have a different filter running, a different set of beliefs installed. And those beliefs let them see doors that you and I could walk past every single day without even registering they're there. And building on all of that, there's something even deeper going on, which is that everything you expect tends to show up. You think you're predicting how things are going to go, but what you're really doing is creating the outcome in advance. Every expectation kicks off a chain of behavior and body language and energy and tiny decisions that end up producing the exact result you anticipated. If you go into a situation expecting rejection, you hold back just slightly. You communicate with a little less certainty. You carry a different energy. And the other person, whether you believe it or not, picks up on that and responds accordingly. And whether they pick up on that consciously or unconsciously is a different story, but they do pick up on it and they respond accordingly. Then the rejection happens and it just confirms what you already believed was going to happen. So you never catch your own role in it while it's playing out. The whole chain is invisible in real time. And all you register is the end result. And that result becomes one more piece of evidence that your original belief was supposedly right. That the world works this way, that this is just how it goes for you. And the same mechanism works the other way too. If you walk into something expecting to be taken seriously, you show up with a completely different posture, a different voice, a different kind of presence. People respond to that. They give you more room, more attention, more weight. You're putting out a signal at all times, whether you realize it or not. Your beliefs shape that signal. And the world is just responding to whatever you're really broadcasting. Which means you've got far more influence over your outcomes than anyone ever told you. The influence just lives at a layer deeper than most people are willing to look at or mess with. And it actually goes even further than your own perception. Your beliefs, they don't stay contained inside you. They leak out into everything around you, into everything you do. The way you hold yourself in a room, the way you talk, the way you respond under pressure, all of it. And all of it is broadcasting something. And the people around you pick up on that and mirror it back without even realizing they're doing it. And researchers actually proved this decades ago. In the famous Rosenthal experiment, teachers were told that certain random students had been identified as gifted. The teachers didn't consciously change anything about how they taught. They just naturally smiled more at those students. They challenged them a bit more. They gave them a bit more feedback. And the students' IQ scores actually went up. These were random kids. The only thing that changed was the expectation, and the expectation changed the behavior, and the behavior changed the measurable result. And your environment is doing this to you every single day. The people around you are responding to whoever they believe you are, which is really whoever you believe you are. And then you respond to their response, and the whole thing locks the current version of you in place. And that loop only breaks when you change the signal you're putting out. When you start holding a different belief about who you are, people start treating you differently. And that new treatment feeds back into the new belief, and it makes it stronger. And this is also why your environment matters so much more than most people give it credit for. If you're surrounded by people who keep reflecting your old identity back to you, it takes enormous energy to maintain a new one against that current. You need people and spaces around you that already reflect where you're going. Every conversation that pulls you back into the old story is a drag. Every relationship that keeps reinforcing the old ceiling is weight you're carrying for no reason. And honestly, the fastest way to shift your identity is really to shift your environment. Get yourself around people who already see you as the version you're in the process of becoming. So, with that said, let's talk about the construct itself. So now we get to the part where the whole thing kind of flips, right? If your current self was never chosen and it was really just assembled from other people's beliefs, opinions, or expectations, then there's nothing sacred about holding on to it. You're allowed to change it. You're allowed to edit it however you please. You're allowed to throw the whole thing out and start from scratch if you wanted to. And doing that isn't dishonest. It's actually the most honest move you can make. And most people are just sitting there waiting for permission to change who they are. They want somebody or something to tell them that it's okay to drop the old version. They want evidence first. They want proof that the new identity is going to work before they're willing to commit to it. The waiting is the trap, though. The proof always comes after the shift, never before it. So you don't need permission for this. You need a decision. One clear, firm, non-negotiable decision about who you're going to be going forward. Everything else follows from that. And the people who've actually made real transformations in their lives, if you study them, they all did basically the same thing. They picked their identity on purpose and then built everything else around it. The traits, the beliefs, the emotional baseline, all of it was designed deliberately. Steve Jobs did this. Muhammad Ali did this. Conor McGregor did this. They all declared who they were before a single piece of evidence existed to support it. They spoke from it and moved from it and lived from it until the world eventually caught up. And this isn't some special ability that only famous people have access to. The mechanics are the same for anyone. Choose the identity, speak from it, move from it, feed it, protect it. That's the whole process. And what's really interesting is that building a new identity works through the exact same mechanics that build the old one. Repetition, emotion, and evidence. The only real difference is that this time you're running the process on purpose instead of absorbing everything by accident. So you take the new belief and you repeat it. And I don't mean some hollow affirmation that you mumble while you're brushing your teeth. I mean you say it with actual weight behind it. You think it deliberately throughout the day. You let it run through your decisions and your conversations and the way you carry yourself, and you constantly keep it at the back of your mind, at the back of your head, or front of mind, if you prefer that phrase. You constantly keep it there in whatever you do. The subconscious doesn't actually care whether something is true yet. It cares about frequency and emotional charge. Saturate it with the new belief enough times, and it starts accepting that belief as the new default, the new normal. And the thing that matters most here is consistency over intensity. A moderate belief that you hold every single day will outperform a massive emotional declaration that happens once and then fades by the following week because you don't really believe it yourself. And along with that, logic alone won't shift identity. Emotion is what does it. You need to actually feel the new version of yourself in your body, what it's like to be that person, how that person stands, breathes, walks into a room. You anchor the whole thing in physical sensation, not an intellectual understanding. A few seconds of real, genuine, full body feeling will do more than hours of intellectual repetition ever could. Your body doesn't process words, it processes sensation. So build moments into your day where you deliberately drop into that state. It could be music, movement, visualization, whatever puts you in the felt experience of the person you're constructing. Make it a practice. And then alongside of that, you start collecting what I'd call micro proof. Small moments that suggest the new identity might actually be taking hold. It could be a compliment, a small breakthrough, a shift in how someone responds to you. You write these down, you come back to them, you build the case one piece at a time until the weight of evidence tips towards the new version of you. Every piece of micro proof adds to the foundation. Enough of them stack together and you've got something solid underneath you, something that holds real weight. And there's a point, and you can predict exactly when it hits, where the new belief becomes easier to hold than the old one. It just clicks into place. And that will happen if you keep stacking and don't stop. And as a personal story here, a lot of you don't know this, but I was about 120 to 130 kilograms when I was 15 years old. And I started doing this basically without knowing what it was, without having a name for it, where I started telling myself that I will get leaner, I am leaner, and I started eating healthier as a result of that. And I started repeating that every single day and acting from that place, acting as the person that will get lean, acting as the person that will lose weight. That happened. And then eventually I got to my dream weight at that time. But I was super overweight, in my opinion, at least for someone that's 15 years old. And I had health issues because of it. This is what you do. You start to believe something about yourself, and then you collect microproof. My microproof was honestly the fact that I could run for longer. My microproof was the weight dropping, obviously, and the fact that I was eating healthier. And at some point, being that person became easier than being who I was, than eating all the crap that I was eating at that time. And I started believing that I was this person, that I will eventually be there. And I saw myself there already until it just became reality. Now, it required effort, of course, but it became reality. And then there's the final stage, which is where the new identity stops feeling like something you're performing. And like I said, it starts feeling like it's just you. You don't have to remind yourself of it anymore. You don't have to force anything. The beliefs are embedded. The filter has completely shifted. The thermostat, like we talked about earlier, is set to a completely different temperature now. And it's very hard to change that again. To go back to what it was. You can change it deliberately using this process, but it's very hard to go back to where you were because you've fundamentally changed who you see yourself as. And from there, you can never go back to that person. Because the habits, the identity of this new version of you is now you. It's now part of you. Going back to the old version will require a lot of effort. And so this is where a lot of people get confused, honestly. They think embodiment means acting the part perfectly, nailing it every time. What it actually means is that the identity has settled deep enough into your nervous system that your default reactions, impulses, and thoughts are now coming from the new operating system without you having to think about it. So you stop saying you're becoming someone, you just are that person. The gap between what you intend and what you actually express closes on its own. Conversations start to feel different, decisions come easier, things start showing up in your life, and you don't waste time questioning whether you deserve them or not. That's what embodiment actually looks like in practice. And for this to fully land, the old identity has to die. You have to starve it, right? You stop telling the old story. You stop rehearsing old limitations with people. You stop bonding with others over shared struggles that just keep reinforcing who you used to be. And there might be grief that comes with that, which is completely normal. You're letting go of something that's been familiar for a very long time, even if it was limiting you the whole way through. Feel the grief and just keep going. The old self leaves a gap when it goes, and the new self can fill that gap, not through effort or willpower, but just by being the one you've been choosing to feed this whole time. And once the new identity fully integrates, it holds. Like I said, your brain will fight to maintain it the same way it used to fight to maintain the old one. The same mechanisms that kept you stuck for years now keep you elevated. The system works exactly the same way, just at a higher setting, which is the whole point. And this time, the difference is you've chosen it. That's the real foundation of all of this. Not goals, not habits, not strategies, identity. Everything else you build sits on top of it. And the deepest freedom you'll ever find in self-development is realizing that your identity was always a construction regardless. It was always editable. You just weren't told you had the editor open the whole time. So, with that said, let's go over the review. We talked about the overview, we talked about the authenticity trap, the programmed self, the constructed self, the review, and finally, your action items for the day or the next few days. First, take 3 beliefs you hold most highly and most tightly about yourself and trace each one back to where it actually came from. If the answer is that you've always been this way, that's not an answer. You can go further. Find the moment it was actually installed. You'll find it was most likely borrowed. And then pick one new belief about yourself that has zero evidence behind it yet and write it down. And then say it every day with real conviction behind it, and then act from it. And start collecting whatever scraps of micro-proof show up that it might be true. Stack the evidence until the scale tips. Identify one pattern or one story or one environment that keeps reinforcing your old identity, and then cut off its supply. Stop rehearsing it, stop bringing it up, stop giving it your attention. The old self dies the moment you stop feeding it. With that said, as I said in the beginning, if you want to work with me one-on-one, make sure to book a call from the link in the description. If you want this training along with its respective document, make sure to join the free community from the link in the description. And if you want weekly newsletters on how to improve every aspect of your life, meaning health, wealth, love, and self, then make sure to join the free newsletter from the link in the description. With that said, I hope this was valuable. If it was, let me know in the comments, like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for being here.